can't fucking sleep at night. Blew up for the 1,000th time. Guess I'm always lucky, right? Pop some shit, then fall behind. I jump the gun and take what's mine. Looking like you've seen a ghost, moving like a poltergeist.
Hey guys, welcome to Hella Spooky. This is my new podcast, and each week there will be a new episode that is sure to make you hella spooked. But first, I do want to introduce myself for new listeners. I am Ally, also known as AllyBrianne on my beauty platforms, on my YouTube and Instagram. I have been obsessed and a makeup lover for the past 5+ years. And I share my love for beauty on my YouTube, my beauty blog, my Instagram. But I do also share vlogs and more personal things, hobbies that I absolutely love, like books and journaling and cross-stitching, all of those things. And 3 years ago, or close to 3 years ago, I started my first podcast, which was Caffeine Crime. And I've absolutely loved it. I've tried to stay consistent as a whole with it, but season 7 just started. So if you want to check it out, you can. I will have it linked. But I've always fell headfirst into true crime cases, and I'm a very curious creature when it comes to anything that you have to like really dig into, any mysteries. So it goes further than true crime. I really like spooky things. I'm a horror junkie. I love conspiracy theories, haunted places, paranormal things. So for Caffeine Crime, every October I was doing spooky season where I would talk about paranormal places, and I had such a fun time with this, but I felt like it was starting to kind of take over what Caffeine Crime originally was supposed to be about, and that was true crime. So I decided to end that there, but that's why I'm so excited to now have Hella Spooky. I've been working on this for quite a while now, and it's been something I've been very passionate about for a while, planning as much as I possibly could, and there's no better time to start it than right now during spooky season. So I'm going to keep true crime over on Caffeine Crime, and I'm going to bring the other things like paranormal stories, haunted places, conspiracy theories, and anything that spooks me here on Hella Spooky. I hope you join me every single week if you want to be hella spooked. As of now, you can listen to Hella Spooky on Anchor podcast platforms. More podcast platforms are coming. It's going to be a wide range, just like Caffeine Crime is. But you can also tune in to my YouTube, AllyBrianne, and watch me not only tell you spooky stories and mysteries and anything that we're going to be discussing, but also watch me do my makeup at the same time, because this has always been a beauty channel. And with that being said, I'm also going to have a little shout out segment where we talk about a couple things that I'm going to be applying to my face and anything else in general that I need to about whatever we're talking about each episode. So today I definitely have to shout out some makeup I'm using, but I'm also going to be shouting out these cute earrings if you are watching on YouTube. These are little clay handmade earrings from a small shop. You have to check them out. On Instagram, their handle is Hello Teddy Co. She is super, super sweet and so creative. She's already planning for like the holiday season and Christmas and all of that. So definitely go check her out and support another small business. But yeah, these skeleton earrings are just so freaking cute. I absolutely love them. If you're listening on the podcast, you can check out the Hella Spooky Instagram, because I will be sharing a lot of stuff there, even about this episode. The Instagram handle is Hella Spooky Podcast. That is it. On my face today, I am not going to list every single thing that I used, but I will show you guys a couple things because, again, this is some beauty content for you. And I just have to because I was just blown away. But if you want to know every single thing on my face that I used today, I will have it down in the description, so check it out. But for the first time ever, I've never used anything from the brand Gourmand Girls. It is a small indie brand. I have watched a couple and talked back and forth with the CEO, like the owner of the brand, through her Instagram lives before, and she is such a nice person. But this is her newest palette, Spooked. I'm using it on my eyes today, and if you are just listening, it is such a beautiful palette. You have so many fall essential shades, and each pan has like different imprints. There's pumpkin imprints, there's a G for gourmand girls, there is bats, there's spider webs, there's so much fun things on the little prints, and you have so many mattes to work with, including a red and a black, which are always really hard formulas to get right. I can't wait to play with those. But yeah, I definitely dipped into some orange today, and like this like duochrome moment on my lid is absolutely stunning. So check out Gourmand Girls. It is a smaller indie brand, but I was blown away. I'm definitely going to be doing a 3-look, 1 palette with this very soon because I am so inspired to play with it some more. Since I'm mentioning this palette, I do just have to mention, because this is like my first impressions on it, I have to say that this was designed by Doodles by the Bunny, and it was like her vision. She created the color story and like what the palette would look like. So freaking cool. Congrats to both of them, the brand and her. It's absolutely stunning. You guys killed it on this. I am obsessed with how this look turned out. I will mention my lip though, because it is a fall favorite. It is an orange liquid lipstick, like a, not like a pumpkin orange, but like a burnt orange almost. It's fall vibes for sure. But this is Lunar Beauty's liquid lipstick. They brought it back this year in the shade Hollow's Eve. So good. Lastly, I'm going to shout out Entertainment and the New York The Cut, because they offered so much credible information on this case, and without them I wouldn't have had near as much to go off of with the story, which is The Watcher. It has become #1 on Netflix, but the real story with the real family is next level horror movie like storyline. The real life family even say they will not be watching the show anytime soon because they were traumatized just by the trailer. Have you guys seen the show yet on Netflix? Me and my husband did binge watch it. We watched all of it. I will be mentioning here and there some of my thoughts on it, but this is your warning that I will be going over the actual case, so not everything that's in the show, but it will be enough to spoil a lot of what's in the show if you haven't watched it. So if you do want to watch it first and then come back and watch this, I would do so if you don't want it to be spoiled. But it is still, the original story is still just absolutely crazy. And I found it super interesting being able to compare the two from what actually happened and what they chose to do with the show. We're going to be diving into what actually happened, the real story behind The Watcher in Westfield, New Jersey. One night in June 2014, Derek Broaddus had just finished an evening of painting at his new home in Westfield, New Jersey, when he went outside to check the mail. Derek and his wife, Maria, had closed on the 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard 3 days earlier and were doing some renovations before they moved in. They didn't really expect a lot of mail at the time since they had only been living there for 3 days, and if anything, it would probably just be bills. But there was a white card-shaped envelope, and it was addressed in thick, clunky handwriting to the new owner. And the typed note inside began, "Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. 657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched it in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out." For the Broadduses, buying 657 Boulevard had been a dream of theirs. Maria was actually from Westfield, New Jersey, and the house she grew up in, her childhood home, was literally just like a few blocks away. For Derek, he had a good job in Maine, but he worked his way up of an insurance company in Manhattan. He even became the senior vice president with a salary that was large enough to buy this home that was $1.3 million. Derek had just celebrated his 40th birthday when they bought 657 Boulevard, and moving in was Derek, his wife Maria, and their 3 children. It's also stated that in the first letter, there was also the term, "How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?" What Derek thought was maybe just a, nice little welcome to the neighborhood letter turned out to be something that was a little eerie for him to read. The letter even identified their make and model of the vehicle they drove, which was a Honda minivan. It also stated the fact that they knew renovations were happening in the house. "I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, 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 bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy." Now, I feel like you would read this and think, okay, this is a welcome to the neighborhood, meeting my neighbors. As you continue reading it, I feel like you kind of then go to, this is strange, this is weird. And then you go to the next stage, which is whatever neighbor this is, they are very judgy already, and this is probably not going to be a good living experience with this kind of person living so close. But here's the thing. Earlier in the week, they had went to the house and actually met some of the neighbors. Children who at the time were 5, 8, and 10 years old were also present. They were running around the backyard, and apparently there was several kids from the neighborhood that were there playing with them. And this was something else that the person who wrote this letter seen as well, saying, "You have children, I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted." He or she then goes on to write, "More on the way?" ? Now you're at the stage where you're just like, okay, now this is really weird. Like, this is like predatory weird. Like, you're watching my children. Why are you writing this all in a letter? Like, why wouldn't you just go to them and talk to them instead of stating all of this, that they're watching their children? Very sketch. But it gets darker. "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family, or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me." I'm just saying, I have 2 little boys. If I ever got a letter like this, I don't know. I feel like I'd be going door to door right then and being like, what is this? I would, oh my God. Reading these letters, and even that part in general, just made me so sick to my stomach. I can't imagine. Now, this letter, it had no address, of course, no return address. It was definitely very, very anonymous, but they did definitely want to, I wouldn't even say hint at who they were as much as kind of wanted to mock at them for not knowing who it was. Because the letter ended with, "Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am one of them. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look out any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin." And at the bottom of the letter, it was scrawled across the page, "The Watcher." So we're back to Derek at their mailbox. It's 10 p.m. at night, and he's reading this letter. He said that he raced around the house, turned off lights so that nobody could see inside, called the local police, which was the Westfield police department. And this is when an officer came straight over to the house to read this letter. After reading it, he looked at Derek and he just said, "What the fuck is this?" He went on to questioning Derek if he had enemies, if there was any type of person in their life that would think that this was like a funny prank or something that maybe a friend would just do to try to spook them. He also noticed all the construction going on the house and all the tools that were on the porch, and he said, "I would like if you would move, this stuff. I would recommend it. Move all these tools to like a different location or inside the house so that nobody is tempted to throw it through any windows." So since this was a brand new home, they weren't fully moved in yet. They still had their old place, and that was actually where Maria and the kids were at. So he goes back to their old house to be with the kids and Maria. They decide that they're going to type out an email to a John and Andrea Woods, who were the couple who sold them 657 Boulevard. They asked if they had any idea who this watcher might be or why he or she had written this letter and sent it to them. He tells them in this letter about the different details that this watcher had said, including one line that said, "I asked the Woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened." Andrea Woods replies in the morning. She says, a few days before moving out, the Woods had also received a letter from the watcher. The note had been odd, she said, and she said that it mentioned a lot of things about watching the house, in particular things that the family members had been doing, and overall, literally observing this family and what they did day to day. Andrea said her and her husband had never received anything like it 23 years while living in this place. And they just didn't think much of it, and they just threw the letters away. But after reading some of the things that were put in the letters to the Broadduses, they were like, oh, okay, like this is really sketchy. So they agreed to go to the police station with them the next morning. Detective Leonard Lugo told her not to tell anyone about the letters, including her new neighbors, most of whom she had never met. He insinuated that they were now all suspects. The coming weeks, they really focused on their renovations, but it was always in the back of their mind, like, are we going to receive another letter? They were constantly checking the mailbox, seeing if anything was coming in. They were so tied up in all of it that Derek canceled a work trip. Maria took the kids to their new house, and she would yell their names if they wandered to any corners of the yard. She would tell them, you have to stay at where I can see you. So get this, a couple of the neighbors come over and they're like talking to Derek and kind of like asking about the renovation. So he's like, yeah, I'll show you them. And he starts walking this couple through the house, like showing like different renovations and stuff. And he said he tensed up, literally froze, when the woman said, "It'll be nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood." I don't know about you guys, but I don't hear anybody call children young blood. Like, young blood for me is an artist. Around this time, the contractor also showed up one day, and a really heavy sign that he had hammered in the front yard had been ripped out of the ground. And I mean, obviously, like, it could have been anybody who did this, but like, it wouldn't have been the family. They wouldn't have like ripped something out of the ground that their contractor had put in the ground. And he also knew that like not any of his men would have taken it up without him knowing about it. While Maria was at the house one day, she was looking at paint samples for part of the areas, like the rooms that they were redoing. And she decides she's going to check the mail. I don't know if like the mailman came by or something, was putting letters in. But she goes out and she recognizes the thick black lettering on a card-shaped envelope. And she just called the police right away. And once again, the letter had terms such as, "Welcome again to the new home at 657 Boulevard. The workers have been busy and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have you found what it is in the walls yet? In time, they will." Instead of saying homeowners or like new residents of this place or whatever, like they did in the first one, They actually addressed them by name, but they did misspell it. So it was like they had to have heard someone call them it. They spelled their last name, Mr. and Mrs. Bradus. So Brad Duss instead of Broadus. This was something that the contractors and different construction workers were calling them while they worked on the house. So the only thing they could think of was that this watcher could have been very, very close and heard one of them say Mr. or Mrs. Broadus and just thought it was Bradus. The watcher also really bragged on himself in this letter, letting them know that he had learned so much about them and who they were, and especially when it came to their children, which again is going to alarm any parent who is already on alert of a new location and predators. So not only did they call the children by their nickname that Maria would actually use quite a lot when she was yelling at them from the yard or from, the house when they were playing in the yard, but they also listed them in birth order. It also said, "I am pleased to know your names now and the names of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often." The letter asked about one child in particular. So now it's a targeting tactic. They said that they had seen the child using a painting easel on the front porch. And he asked if she is an artist and the family. And the letter continued, 657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or will they be too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the watcher, and I have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession, and now you are too, Bradus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I will be watching. This was enough for Derek and Maria to stop bringing their kids around. They were no longer sure when or if they would be able to actually move in, and several weeks later, a third letter arrived and said, "Where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you." To give you a little bit of an idea about Westfield, when asking Westfield residents, a lot of them said it is still a very safe place. They described it as Mayberry from the Andy Griffith show. Everybody is very welcoming. Everybody, it's there's no strangers. Even if they don't know you, they just treat you like their own, and very friendly. It's also a very wealthy place. It's actually ranked 18th wealthiest place in New Jersey. That was in 2014 at least, when the watcher was writing these letters and sending them to the Broaduses. There wasn't a whole lot that was going on in this place either. I mean, the only other news thing that was happening at this time was the fact that a Trader Joe's roof collapsed. And a lot of people were just upset because they didn't have Trader Joe's for a while. They did say that buying a home in this area was so hard because everything was so expensive, and it was just, you kind of had to jump through hoops to be able to buy a home. So once again, buying this home was a dream to them. They wanted to be here. They wanted to be in her hometown, and they absolutely fell in love with the house. And one of the most desirable homes in this town was 657 Boulevard. Boulevard used to be the place everybody wanted to be. Everybody wanted to live there. They said if you lived on Boulevard, you made it. 657 Boulevard was built in 1905. It's one of the biggest homes on the block. And when the Woodses put it up on the market, there was so many offers and multiple of them were like above asking price. Because of this, the Broadduses started thinking that the watcher had to have been somebody else who placed a bid on the house and didn't get it and was now tormenting them because they did get the house. But the Woodses said that they didn't think this was an ordeal because one of the buyers backed out because of medical reasons, while another one already found a different home. And I guess those were like the top people who were really pushing for this house. The Woodses actually believed it could have been just somebody in the neighborhood messing with them. And the letters did kind of indicate that by the fact that this person had seen so much, they had spent so much of their time watching this family and seeing everything that was going on inside this house. Also, the letters had been processed at the Postal Service distribution center that was more northern New Jersey, so that meant that they had to have been close in that proximity. The first was postmarketed for June 4th, and only a day after the contractors arrived, and that was before it was public that the house had sold. Now, the Woodses, they never even put up a for sale sign. They just, I think, listed it. So locally, they didn't put the for sale sign up, and then they sold it. But it was also the same day that contractors showed up at the house. And most of the renovations were all interior, on the inside. So a lot of people wouldn't see what actually was going on. Even when they showed the detective around the house, they mentioned the whole part about him seeing the kid painting with the easel, and they showed where it was at on the porch and how it was pretty hidden from the street. Now, the Broadduses did make a little bit of a scene at a pool party that the neighbors across the street were having. They went and they took their kids, and they wanted to, obviously they wanted to be friendly and go to the pool party, and they also kind of wanted to snoop around because they had listened to detectives and hadn't told anybody about these letters they were receiving. So they were kind of snooping to kind of see, if anyone would slip and say something that would be okay, gotcha, But they spent the whole time stressed out with the fact that it was so chaotic and busy and their kids were just, running around like crazy. So they spent the whole time just being stay close, and, yelling their kids' names and stuff. So Maria even said the neighbors probably thought we were crazy. At one point, Derek was chatting with John Schmidt, who lived 2 doors down, when he told him about the Langfords, who lived between them. Peggy Langford was in her 90s, and several of her adult children, all in their 60s, lived with her. The family was a bit odd, Schmidt said, but harmless at that. He described one of the younger Langfords, Michael, who didn't work and had a beard like Ernest Hemingway, as kind of a Boo Radley character. Derek thought the case was solved. The Langford house was right next to the easel on the porch. The family had lived there since 1960s, and the watcher's father, the letter said, had begun observing 657 Boulevard. Richard Langford, who was the father of this family, had died 12 years earlier, and the current watcher claimed to have been on the job for the better part of 2 decades. So they, of course, tell the detective about this family, but he already knew about this family, and he thought of them a week after, the letters arrived. He had actually brought Michael to the police department to question him on it, and Michael denied knowing anything about it. He said that there was no hard evidence that could hold Michael to having written these letters. And after a few weeks, the police chief told them there wasn't much the department could do any further because it had just been letters. Derek said, "This is someone who threatened my kids. The police are saying probably nothing's gonna happen. Probably isn't good enough for me." And after the second letter, Derek had told the cops that if they didn't take care of the situation, they would have a different kind of situation on their hands. He said, "This person attacked my family, and where I'm from, if you do that, you get your ass beat." They were very, very frustrated, and that is when they began their own investigation. He became obsessed with it. He set up webcams all around his place. He spent nights hiding in the dark, watching. He wanted to see if anyone was watching the house at close range. He said Maria thought he was crazy. He had a map of the neighborhood describing and pinpointing when each neighbor had moved in, and the only people that had been there since the 60s were the Langfords. He even had markings of possible, like, ways that they could see certain, things that had been mentioned in the letters. So, like the easel, for instance, there was only like one spot from the street that you could really see where that easel was at. He also looked for a range of like earshot where somebody could actually hear people talking and, saying things that were also addressed in the letters. They turned to several experts to come in and look into this for them as well. They employed a private investigator who staked out the neighborhood, ran background checks on the Langfords. Derek reached out to a former FBI agent, and something that they did point out was that the envelope was addressed to M/M Bradis, saying that it was very old school to put something like that on a letter. Also the fact that it would like include the weather for the day, like warm and humid, sunny and cool for a summer day. They went as deep to also realize that sentences had double spaces between them. They also said that they were really surprised in the lack of profanity since there was so much like anger and aggression in some of the sentences that were being written. The FBI agents didn't think that this so-called watcher was an actual threat as far as going further and doing something. They just thought it was just a bunch of letters. But one part of a letter led detectives to recommend looking into former housekeepers or their descendants, because I thought maybe the watcher was jealous that the Broadduses had bought a home that the writer couldn't afford. This part of the letter says, "The house is crying from all of the pain it is going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stilling its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard, when I ran from room to room imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old, and so did my father, and he kept watching until the day he died, and now I watch and I wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again." The focus remained on the Langfords for the most part, and with this like ongoing like private investigation, the Broadduses had to get confirmation from the police department to send a letter to the Langfords announcing their plans to tear down and demolish the entire house, just to see if they could get kind of like an uproar from the Langfords. Nothing happened. There was no response. Detective Lugo did bring Michael Langford in for another interview, but got nowhere, and his sister Abby came with him and was like really accusing the police of harassing their family. At this point, the Broadduses are still not happy, so they hire Lee Levitt, who was a lawyer who met with several members of the Langford family, as well as their attorney, to show them the letters along with photos explaining how their home was one of the few vantage points from which the easel could be seen. The meeting was a little intense. The Langfords insisted that Michael was innocent, and not much else came from it after that. And just like the show, the father, Derek, goes absolutely just out of his mind. Like, he is having such a hard time even sleeping. He's having nightmares. He had a dream that he was confronted by Peggy, the eldest Langford, and demanded she build an 8-foot fence between the properties. Maria was also having dreams. She woke up one night from really vivid dream of a man who lived nearby. She said he was wearing these boots and carrying a pitchfork and calling to the kids, and I couldn't get them in time. Ugh. She said she thought anybody could be the watcher at this point. She said it was hard to go to grocery stores. It was hard to go out anywhere without constantly looking face to face and wondering, is this the watcher? She watched for signs of people staring at them, watching her kids, making any type of interaction that was weird to her. Further looking into this case, they said that it was pretty reckless if it was Michael, because they had talked to him after the first letter and then more letters were sent. They, of course, were considering other neighbors. A private investigator found 2 child sex offenders within a few blocks. Bill Woodward, the Broaddus' house painter, had also noticed something strange. The couple behind 657 Boulevard kept a pair of lawn chairs really close to the Broaddus' property. And one day, he said he was looking out the window and saw the older guy sitting in one of the chairs. He wasn't facing his house. He was facing the Broaddus' house. By the end of 2014, the investigation had stalled. Nobody was getting any leads, and there wasn't really much more to go off of. There was no digital trail, no fingerprints, no way to place someone at the scene of the crime. They didn't see anybody lurking around. Derek, now grasping at straws, not sure what he should do. He does take the letters to a priest and has the priest come and bless the house. With the renovations to the house, there was also a new alarm system that was put in, but all of it was still like they were just flooded with anxiety of moving into this house. They constantly wondered, would it be safe for our kids to run in the backyard and just play like normal kids at their home? Are we going to receive another letter? Derek was pricing like trained German shepherds. He posted a job on a website for military veterans and put, all you have to do is work out in the backyard every day. But the Broadduses hadn't bought 657 to feel this way. Like, this is a nice ass house, like super expensive, and like this is the way that they're living. Like, they haven't even really been able to live in their place. Maria says at the end of the day, it came down to, what are you willing to risk? We weren't going to put our kids in harm's way. And Derek had said that he had to keep responding to the alarm system going off. Nothing would ever come of it. They don't know if it was like maybe faulty, but it was enough to make the situation a whole lot worse. And sometimes it was in the middle of the night and he would literally be like a horror movie walking the halls with a knife. Construction workers and painters that were still at the house working said that this family was petrified. Not to mention, the watcher continued to send letters. 657 Boulevard is turning on me. It is coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend and now it's my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again, like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone. The Broadduses sold their old home and then they moved in with Maria's parents. They were living with her parents while paying mortgage and property taxes on 657 Boulevard. Derek said, I had to do things like shovel the driveway. Just picture that little indignity. I'd go at 5 a.m, then come back to do it again at my in-laws. They told only a handful of friends about the letters, which left others to ask why they weren't moving in, like legal issues. People are like wondering like if they were getting a divorce or separating, like what was going on, since like nobody was like steadily living in the house they just bought. Not to mention the anxiety and stress of the watcher caused so much tension in the marriage that they were constantly fighting. They even claimed that they were taking medication just to be able to fall asleep at night. Derek said he was a depressed wreck. Maria decided to see a therapist after a routine doctor's visit that began with the question, how are you? It caused her to burst into tears, and the therapist said she was suffering post-traumatic stress that wouldn't go away until they got rid of the house. And 6 months after the letters arrived, the Broadduses decided to sell 657 Boulevard. They initially listed it for more than they paid to reflect the renovations they'd done. But by 6 months of all of this going on, there was so much gossip concerning this home, especially in like the real estate companies and stuff. Rumors had been going around about why this house had sat empty this entire time. One broker actually emailed them saying that their client loved the house, but there was just too many rumors going around about it. Some of them even said that there was a rumor about a sexual predator that was stalking the house. They wanted to know more information from the actual family, and that's when the family had to send a partial disclosure of like the letters and letting them know like what they have been going through. Unlike the Woodses, they did say anybody who actually is like accepted and is actually going to buy this house, we are going to show them the letters. And bids came in and they were below asking price, and the Broadduses just did not want to take this financial hit. Even their agent that was like helping them was just like, you guys are being like too forthcoming. You guys need to like, don't give everything away. And they're like, we don't want anybody else to live through what we went through. Like, they still wouldn't be able to sleep at night, like knowing that they're doing this to another family. And although the Woodses still say that they never felt like they were watched even after getting a letter, on June 2nd, 2015, a year after buying the house, the Broadduses actually filed a legal complaint against the Woodses, arguing that they should have disclosed the letter just as they had. The fact that water sometimes got in the basement was another issue, I guess, that they addressed as well. Their kids still didn't know about the Watcher, and their lawyer assured them that at most, a small legal newswire might pick up the story. But of course, the Today Show gets a hold of it, and one of the columns that features a lot of creepy stories said that they seen the complaint and snippets of this Watcher and menacing threats and put the story out there, and it went viral. News trucks were now camping outside of 657 Boulevard. One local reporter set up a lawn chair to conduct his own watch. The Broadduses got more than 300 media requests, but were advised from their crisis management consultant not to speak publicly and spare their kids even more attention. They left Westfield and went to a friend's beach house. During this time, they had so much more tragic things happening in the family, like Maria's grandfather having a heart attack, and one of their friends staying with had a grand mal seizure. They decided it was time to set their kids down and tell them everything that was going on because they knew that they were going to see stuff about it. And the kids, of course, had plenty of questions. The kids wanted to know who the Watcher was. Where does this person live? Why is this person angry with us? And Derek said, can you imagine having that conversation with a 5-year-old? Your town isn't as safe as you think it is, and there's a boogeyman obsessed with you. And of course, all of us, like armchair detectives, went crazy and looking into stuff, and some people went as far as to even get on like Google Maps and pull up pictures from the address, and they said that there is a picture of a man sitting in a vehicle holding a camera in the driver's seat. There were so many people coming out of the woodwork saying it was this person, it was this person. One of them was a local high school creative writing project, which you will also see on the show. In the end, he said it was just a fun creative writing experience for the students to write about different homes. Some people really came at the Broadduses saying they would never stop some letters from them moving into this nice house. They were being judged left and right. Derek said none of them have read the letters or had their children threatened by someone they didn't know. To decide whether this person's only nuts enough to write these letters and not to do something, what if something did happen? It also made a lot of people in the area on edge because they were wondering if the Watcher was going to send them letters or be watching them. Lori Clancy, who teaches piano lessons in her house behind 657 Boulevard, said one of her students came for a lesson after the news of the Watcher broke and started crying her eyes out. She was terrified to walk down the boulevard. Even the mayor had to publicly, assure people that the Watcher hadn't been heard of from in a year. And even though the police hadn't solved the case, their investigation had been exhaustive with no leads, nothing to go off of. It was just letters. Even neighbors close, really close to this house were actually pretty hurt by just finding out about something going on in their own neighborhood. And then of course the Langford family is also being brought into this and being why are these people not looked into more? But every other neighbor really stood up for this family. Even John Schmidt that we talked about earlier, he even said, Michael's harmless. He brings me my newspaper every morning. This family's well known. They've been here for decades. The only type of discovery made in this case was DNA taken from the envelope that had been licked. The DNA came back as belonging to a woman. This caused them to actually look into Abby Langford, Michael's sister, who was actually a real estate agent. So crazy. She also worked at the local Lord and Taylor, and they actually coordinated a security guard to go in and take her plastic water bottle so that they could test her DNA. And although it was never confirmed if it was in fact hers or not, I'm assuming not, they wouldn't say the reasoning behind it, but they confirmed to the Broadduses that the Langfords were not a suspect whatsoever. It was a shocker for them because they were actually like planning on filing a civil charge against the family. Sandy Langford said, "My family moved to the boulevard in 1961 and we never caused a problem for anyone. This guy gets all these letters and all of a sudden people are pointing fingers." They did look into the handwriting that was on the front of the letter because the rest was typed. And there was just no leads on that either. Derek actually tried to get a friend to hack into a Wi-Fi network in the neighborhood to look for any incriminating documents on any of the neighbors, but in the end, they said that they did not go through with this because, of course, it's illegal, and honestly, they didn't even know if they were going to actually be able to because they said it was so hard. Being back at square one, with this all being out in the public, the police were finally like, we have to step up our game. So they asked Andrea Woods, the previous owner, for a DNA sample, and they even questioned her 21-year-old son. Funny how they are now like looking into it, because now actually really looking into it, they find out that somebody else close also received a letter from someone like the Watcher. Apparently one of them that lived in the home, like one of, I guess, like the kids or whatever, had seen it on the news and was just like on Facebook, "Oh my gosh, like it happened to us too." And I think they shared like a picture of the letter, but then soon after deleted it. I'm sure it was like the family being like, "No, don't bring us into this." The investigators did speak to the family and they confirmed that the letter had been similar to the Broadduses. Finally, the main detective was just like, "I'm staking out the house." He parked in a van on Boulevard and he was watching the house with binoculars. Around 11 p.m., a car stopped in front of the house long enough for him to kind of be like suspicious about like their activity. He traced the car license plate to a young woman in a nearby town whose boyfriend lived on the same block as 657. He confronted her and she said that her boyfriend was into some really dark video games. Went as far to say that a certain player that he really liked was called the Watcher. They did a DNA test on her. They figured that if he was in fact the Watcher, she could have been someone who helped him. The boyfriend did agree to come in for an interview. Once again, no leads. The media was kind of like dying down. So what do? They dropped the case. For the Broadduses, things did not level out. Like things were still like really hard for them. And they said that they kind of felt like an urban legend. Like their house was like now like an urban legend. It was the creepy house of the town. There was so many, of course, conspiracy theories about this. A lot of people said that they thought that the Broadduses actually were sending the letters to themselves just to get their name out there or be and famous for something. And just like the show, a theory was also that the Broadduses were too in over their head. Maybe they couldn't afford it, and now they were trying to find a way to get out of it. I mean, people went really crazy. I don't even want to share like all the details because I just feel like that is such a privacy violation. But people went as far as to see like what their previous house costed and how far up they went in price in houses with moving in on the boulevard, which I just think is like really shitty, honestly. Like I get that they think like it's like buyer's remorse because they can't afford it and stuff like that, but like I stated, like he became like vice president of this insurance firm, and even with all of it and how much they had been concerned, like they were the ones who were starting all of these investigations and trying to figure out like who this person was. And again, it could just be stirring the pot is what they thought. It led so far that they were actually questioning if any renovation was actually being done on the inside. And then people really started doubting the family and saying that the DNA could have been Maria's. Maria actually was tested just to clear her name. The Broadduses never hesitated to answer questions. They answered everything and they were very public about it. Although they did want to keep as much secrecy that they could. Like they didn't want to just air out their entire lives to the media, but they were willing to if it meant clearing their names. There was never any leads confirming that they did this to themselves. The Broadduses now felt like outcasts, not for just their neighborhood, but the entire town. Derek wanted to leave Westfield, but Maria did not. It was where she grew up. She said this person took so much from us. I wouldn't let them take more. And 2 years after the Watcher's letters arrived, the Broadduses borrowed money from family members to buy a second home in Westfield, using an LLC to keep the location private. Derek looked into renting the house to the Department of Veterans Affairs and a company that runs halfway homes. In the spring of 2016, 2 years after the letters, they put 657 back on the market, hoping it would get more interest with all of like the news coverage and media. Maybe somebody saying like, I don't understand why they wouldn't just move into this nice house. Who cares about letters? Would actually buy it. They had a huge open house for this, and even though they were trying to sell this house, Derek and Maria both were like looking for potential people that could be the Watcher. They were looking for signs and any clues to anyone that was walking through the home during this open house. They literally spent hours researching each person, looking into their handwriting, and every buyer who were interested in the house had to meet with their lawyer to actually firsthand look at the letters, and every single one of them backed out. This is when they were proposed an idea from their like lawyers and I think maybe a realtor that they could potentially split the house and maybe make 2 different lots, maybe make a little bit of money, at least what they could off of the lot in general. This caused quite the ruckus in the community. People were mad because this was like a historical house and they wouldn't let this happen to this house. It actually became such a huge thing that they had to go to a 3-hour hearing on the issue where locals were able to come, and there was like over 300 people at this. After the lawyers proposed the idea, neighbors stood to speak. Glenn Dumont from across the street said the proposal would spell the end of the 600 block of Boulevard as we know it. A woman whose kids had been to the Broadduses' old home for a birthday party spoke on behalf of 9 neighbors and presented 657 Boulevard, saying, "Our neighborhoods are constantly under attack from turf, lights, parking decks, you name it. If we can't make a stand on Boulevard, where can we?" Even Abby Langford stood to say she had spent almost 60 years looking at a magnificent, beautiful house and didn't want to be looking out at a driveway. At 11:30 p.m., the board rejected the proposal, and a New Jersey judge later denied the appeal that the Broadduses tried to do on that decision. The Broadduses say that they recognize the potential that 657 Boulevard is, and it's a beautiful house, it's a beautiful street. It was their dream. They say that it is worth maintaining, but were surprised by their neighbors as with everything that they had to say and how much they pushed against their decision. Maria said, "This is my town. I grew up here. I came back. I chose to raise my kids here. You know what we've been through. You had the ability 2.5 years into a nightmare to make it a little better, and you have to decide that this house is more important than we are." That's really how it felt. But soon after this decision from the board, they actually got some good news. A family with grown children and 2 big dogs had agreed to rent 657 Boulevard. The renter told the media that he wasn't really worried about this Watcher, although he had in writing in the lease that if the letters came back, he would be able to get out of the lease. And 2 weeks later, Derek went to 657. There apparently was a squirrel that had taken up residence in the roof, so he was going there to sort out that matter. And when he arrived, the renter handed him a very familiar envelope. And inside the letter said, "Violent winds and bitter cold. To the vile and spiteful Derek and his wretch of a wife, Maria." It had been 2.5 years since the last Watcher letter. It was dated February 13th, the day that they gave the depositions to their lawsuit against the Woodses. It continued and said things like, "You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be, or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move." I walked by the news truck and they took over my neighborhood and mocked me. I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions. 657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher. And although this renter did seem to be a little spooked, he did agree to stay and told them that he would as long as they installed cameras, because the rest of the letter was even more disturbing. The letter said, maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die, planes and cars and bicycles crash, bones break. Maria said it was like we were back at the beginning. But with this, they had new evidence against the Watcher. So they take the letter to the police headquarters, where the detective working the case is just like them, just as shocked to have a new letter from the Watcher. They launch a new search and trace a circle around the house 300 yards. They think the Watcher is somewhere in that proximity. Broaddus's continued to press the case, but there was still not much for the law enforcement to go on, and it was possible to look up and down the street and wonder who the Watcher really was. It could literally be anyone. Years later, Derek and Maria say it is really hard to drive past 657 Boulevard. It's not something they do often. Derek says it's all beautiful trees and beautiful houses, but all I feel is anxious. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking, what would my life be like if this didn't happen? We lost Christmas a couple times, and you don't get that back. Christmas with a 5-year-old. The Broadduses no longer live in fear of the Watcher, but they still feel the effects even today. They do have a tenant at 657, but the rent doesn't even cover the cost of mortgage. They have really struggled financially over this. Their kids are occasionally teased at school, and the conspiracy rumors still linger. And they have to avoid so many people who accuse them of starting all of this in the first place. Derek says, I see these people on the soccer field, at the train station, and my heart starts going like it did when I used to play hockey and was about to get in a fight. And the first time Maria let her daughter go to the pool with her friends, she stared at the tracker on her daughter's phone the entire time, anxious of where her daughter was. One of their kids was in language arts class when the teacher led a debate about whether the family in a book they were reading should move to Westfield. The class said they thought that they should. They said it was a super safe place. And after this lesson, one of the kids turned to one of the Broaddus's kids and said, my parents told me that no matter what your family says, Westfield is safe. Like the Watcher was obsessed with this family and 657 Boulevard. Derek is obsessed with the Watcher, and he always wanted to crack down on who it was and figure out this unsolved mystery. He says it's like cancer, and they think about it every day still. One of the last letters that they received from the Watcher said, you are despised by the house, and the Watcher won. And if you're wondering, like I was wondering about this case, if there's been any more letters, I did not see anything that confirmed that there's been recent letters from the actual Watcher, but apparently just around Christmas time one year, several people in that area received letters that looked just like the Watcher letters, and they, of course, were all anonymous, but were trying to scare them and say kind of like the same thing, like from the Watcher. So it has left them wondering if it's the actual Watcher or if it's just people who, you know, the story's everywhere. It's out there. Of course, people are going to take it and run with it. And it also, that's where I have to wrap this up and say that I feel like all of this coverage on it, I can see where it could be such a huge like anxiety for this family and being traumatized just by the trailer of the show. I actually think it was a pretty decent show, and definitely diving even deeper into the case and seeing all of the similar things from the show, from the real case, is really interesting, and I think they did a phenomenal job on the show. Just like a lot of people, I was kind of like about like the ending. I felt like they could have done a lot more with it, but it's also really hard when it is an unsolved mystery and we don't know who the Watcher is, and I highly doubt we ever will find out who it is. I do like the conspiracy theory of like the surrounding people in the neighborhood. Maybe they just did not connect with these people and wanted to scare them off. It's definitely such a weird mystery, and the fact that this person had that much time on their hands to just watch a house, watch a family, and just send them letters. And the thing is, it's not like it was like a constant thing either, and that's maybe how they were able to do it. It wasn't an all the time thing, but all the information he would give them, he would watch them all the time. It's just, but with all the coverage on this, the new show, it also like that anxiety that they feel, I also kind of feel, because I'm like, what if tons of people just start doing this now because they're just like, oh, that's funny. And they start sending people random letters. And that's what I have to ask. What would you do in that scenario? Like, would you just continue living there? I feel like it's really hard for me because I feel like that's such a big financial hit. But whenever you start threatening a family and threatening their kids, it's just like, just don't feel right putting your kids in that type of situation. That I, for sure, if it was like the show and people were like getting in my house, messing around with my house, and it was more so like they're present there, it's not just these letters, oh my God, yeah, I would be getting out. But from the real life story of the Watcher, it was letters. I know that their alarm system kept going off though, so that is pretty, I don't know. I feel like it's such a tricky situation, and I feel like you don't really know what you're going to do until you're in that position, to where I would never judge this family for what they decided to do. Like, they had to do what they thought was best for their family, and I applaud them for that. But I really do feel for them and hope that they can still try to live their lives fully without being too much in the public eye, because that was not something they ever wanted. But you guys will have to let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any theories on this, or how did you like the show if you watched it? Hopefully this wasn't like a spoiler for you guys. I did warn you that I was going to be deep diving in this, so it would give a lot away from that show. But yeah, I really enjoyed the show. I had heard about this Watcher case, but I had never deep dived like this far into it. So it was definitely a long one, but I hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, I'm really excited about Hella Spooky. I hope you guys are too. And again, all makeup is down below if you are here for the makeup and want to know what I'm wearing today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Go follow me on my new Instagram. I have one for Hella Spooky. It is Hella Spooky Podcast on Instagram. That's it. Follow me there. I will be updating you guys and just sharing some other fun, spooky things. And honestly, it's just like a very fun, creative outlet for me to share other spooky things that are not just true crime. Hope you guys check it out, and I hope you guys come back next week for the next episode. I'm working on it, and I am so excited to sit down and film that one. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.
I see through the shit that you do. Watch me, then steal how I move. Your label faked it right through. Fake place, fake views, and fake you.
I'm afraid when I wake up.